Hi, this is Justin Moses, and you're listening to the Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who plays bluegrass.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another week of Bluegrass Jam Along. Podcast is getting a bit full of interviews at the moment, and that's because I'm taking advantage of the fact that when I'm asking people to come on the show, they are saying yes. I've got another great guest for you this week, and we'll get back to some tunes again as soon as possible, but when the kind of people that I'm asking to come on this podcast say yes, you don't hang around, you get them on. And I've got a great guest for you today, Justin Moses. Justin is... he's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays not only many instruments, but he plays many instruments at a really high level. And you'll hear about that in the interview. But just to give you an example, he's played fiddle in Dan Tyminski's band. He's played banjo with Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder. Regularly plays guitar, mandolin, and octave mandolin with Sierra Hull, who he also happens to be married to. He's a record producer, and he has also been voted IBMA's Resophonic Guitar Player of the Year, otherwise known to me and you as Dobro, for 3 years. So there's a huge range of stuff going on with Justin, and it's just fascinating to chat about that, how he sort of arrived at that point, how he's inspired, who he's inspired by, what that means, and what his plans are for the future. He's just a great guest, somebody who's just brilliant to chat to, very humble, very... open, very entertaining, and yeah, really enjoyed it. So I hope you do too. Here's my interview with Justin Moses. So Justin Moses, welcome to Bluegrass Jam Along.
Hey, nice to be here.
I think one of the reasons I was particularly keen to talk to you, it's not uncommon at all for bluegrass musicians to play several instruments and to be pretty good at several instruments. In fact, it's pretty common that most people play at least a couple of things. But I think it's my perception, anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's quite unusual for somebody to play all the instruments to the sort of level you do, where you could happily sit in a high-level band on pretty much any of them. That seems quite uncommon to me.
Yeah, it does seem like that. I know a lot of, like you said, I know a lot of bluegrass instrumentalists that play several of the instruments and play them really well. But yeah, I got interested in all the bluegrass instruments and never gave any of them up, so I've kind of stuck with trying to play all of them.
And I think that makes it a really interesting conversation, because I know, a lot of the people listening to this podcast are learning instruments and have a constant sort of question about how the best way to do that is, and it can be a bit of a struggle to work out whether you should focus on one instrument or divide your time between them, and we can chat about that in time as well. But I think it'd be interesting just to start off with kind of how you got into this, because I believe that mandolin was your first instrument, sort of around the age of 6.
That's right. Mandolin was the first, and I saw a group playing on TV, and my dad played guitar, so I had that as a background, and there was a group on television, and they had a mandolin in the band, and for whatever reason, maybe it was the size of it or whatever, I thought that might be a cool thing to try to learn. And my parents got me one for Christmas, and we, Dad knew enough about it to show me the first few chords and stuff like that, and I kind of just took it from there, yeah.
And it sounds like, I know you've said previously that you had lessons for sort of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. That's
true, yeah. There's a guy in the town we grew up in that my dad knew of that he knew a lot more, fiddle tunes and bluegrass tunes, stuff like that than he did, so I did have about 6 or 8 weeks of, kind of concentrated study with him. So
it sounds like even from that, you were taking your cassette recorder along, and he was playing tunes that you'd take away and then learn, sort of come back the next week. It sounds like there's a sort of theme emerges, and we'll probably come to this over the course of the chat, but that you're the kind of musician who picks things up by ear and from other people and from seeing people do things and just sort of surrounding yourself with different instruments, different music, and sort of absorbing it all, I guess.
That's definitely true. Yeah. The recording on cassette thing, yeah, it integrates perfectly with the rest. After that, what I ended up doing, which was, sitting down a lot of times for a lot of hours with, well, it was cassettes at the time, and I would be listening to those and hitting that rewind, and listening again and trying to figure out, these little licks, or little parts of a tune that became a whole tune, or, gave me more vocabulary to pull from.
Yeah, and then guitar came next, I guess, from watching your dad play and just sort of seeing the shapes his hands were making on the neck and thinking, oh, well, I wonder, I wonder how I could do that.
There was definitely that, and also, my dad was probably, to a lot of the people around that area, he was one of the better guitar players that people knew of. So people from time to time would ask him for lessons, and so I got to actually witness him also teaching some other people really basic stuff, but exactly what you need to learn, as a beginner. So there was also that, and I think that was a big thing in me learning. I remember one episode in particular where I was watching a guy kind of struggle to do something, and I thought, oh, I could do that, and so it just kind of made me want to try.
Definitely, there's definitely players around who had that influence from family as kids. Billy Strings obviously played with his dad, and I talked to Tristan Scroggins recently, and he was the same. And just having music around the house and having access to it sounds like an incredible thing. Just having people to play.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah, like especially like if it's your parent or guardian or someone that close with you, and of course. My mom played too. She played mostly like piano at first, and then when we got into bluegrass, she switched over to like playing acoustic bass. But and so there was a lot of music around. I wouldn't say that we had this like big diverse musical experience all the time. I mean, there was different things, but just having it around, having somebody play right in front of you a lot. I think that makes a big difference.
And somebody to play with. I mean, if you're 6, 7, 8, your chances of finding other people who want to play the same stuff as you and are, places you can go and jam is pretty limited.
It is. Yeah, no, it's tough. I know on a lot of kids that don't have that.
Yeah. And so it also sounds like you had a bit of opportunity just in terms of the number of instruments that came through the house. I know you've sort of said your dad's just keen on trading sort of whatever, it's always working his way through things and trading one thing for another, and so quite a few instruments pass through the house too.
Yeah, it's the funny thing, and that's what makes it hard in a way for me to say exactly the order that I learned the instruments in, because, first of all, my memory's not as great, obviously, for like, the younger you get, in your life, the less you sort of remember about it. But I know that was the case, that like, we may have always had a fiddle at some point, like we may have always sort of had a fiddle around, but maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure. But I know that, as new things were brought in, like a banjo, for instance, I would be curious about it and want to try to learn it. I didn't necessarily immediately mess with each one, but if it's there over time, it's like, it's just like another thing. It's like, you're just curious about, you want to see what it's all about, really.
Yeah, and that word curious sounds like it sort of sums you up as a musician. It sounds like that's kind of central to who you are, because I think, it's easy to move between instruments and move on from things, but it sounds like you've picked new things up without moving on from the ones you've played already, and that speaks of curiosity and volumes. We'll be right back with you just after this. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins. If you're attending the NAMM show in January, stop by the Collings booth to say hello to the team, get hands-on with their selection of customised acoustics and electrics, and check out some exciting new prototypes they're working on for 2024. They'll also have a few of their world-class artists on hand demoing various instruments. And if you can't attend, don't forget to follow their Instagram and Facebook accounts throughout the show for photos, videos, and the latest news. Collings guitars are hand-built from the Sound Up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If one of your 2024 resolutions is to improve as a musician, Peghead Nation is the place to go. They have 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music. Courses cover bluegrass, old time, Irish music and swing, plus lessons dedicated to improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 a month, and you can add more for $10. Try any course free for a month with the promo code Jam Along. Make 2024 a year of more music at pegheadnation.com.
Oh, that is 100% the case. I never lost interest in the mandolin. You know, since it was the very first instrument that I ever wanted to learn. You know, I really got into each of them. You know, from time to time. Like there was definitely a period when I was probably 12 or 13 where I really got into the banjo, and that's when we really kind of discovered bluegrass. You know, I mean, I sort of knew what it was before, and heard a few things, but you you hear something that really strikes you, and so around that time we really got into bluegrass, and so I got interested in the banjo, and I know I spent a lot of hours just playing the banjo, just focusing on that and trying to get that roll, trying to figure out how to make it all work, and but I never lost interest in the mandolin or guitar. At the time, I think those are probably the ones that were the most present in my life. I probably still, I'm probably maybe thought of myself at that time as a mandolin player. If you had asked me at the time, I might say that, but I was definitely developing, these interests and curiosities all through that time period.
Yeah, and it's I think it's a really interesting one because music is fundamentally music, and if you've learned one instrument or two, then each subsequent instrument, you're not learning what music is. You're just learning different methods of tone production and where to find the notes. And so, when I started off as a drummer, and so I've got an internal sense of rhythm that it makes me a better guitar player or a better mandolin player.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of they all tie in, don't they? But you have a totally new sort of vocabulary to learn on each instrument and a new sort of way of getting the sound out, because a fiddle is the same as a mandolin, but the tone production is entirely different, and a dobro in terms of the thumb pick and finger picks is the same as a banjo, and yet they're not the same. And so there's that big Venn diagram where music sits in the middle and then all the other instruments sort of inform stuff around the edges.
Absolutely. I think that's I started with mandolin and then guitar, and banjo probably being the next one that I took more seriously, I guess, and so it was all, fretted instruments, really, that I learned sort of in that order, I guess you could say, and so they all have these things in common. I made the connection with the banjo immediately that the D, G, and B string on the guitar was exactly like the D, B, G, and B string on the banjo, and just the bottom D was a step lower. So I was just making those connections and then trying to figure out the so the left hand never seemed very complicated to me on that, just because it was so similar already, I thought, in my mind. And so there's with the mandolin and guitar originally, it's not that the notes are laid out exactly the same or anything, but if you learn a melody and really know what the what it's supposed to sound like, finding those notes on the other instrument, it just becomes easier if you've done it, I think, on something else,
Yeah, and you may find, just due to the nature of an instrument, you play a slightly different version of, I don't know, Soldier's Joy on the fiddle than you would do on the guitar, because of the way it lies on the instrument, and different things pop out. But the tune, if you know the tune, then you get to go and find it, and it's in there.
Yeah,
you're not
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with fiddle, did that? I guess there's with fiddle and dobro, actually, there's that sort of intonation thing to deal with as well. I mean, I spent some time playing pedal steel, and in the end, I stopped because I realised my ears just aren't good enough. I'm like, I can do all sorts, but my sense of pitch and intonation just wasn't quite strong enough for all the other bits you've got to do at the same time,
Yeah. For some reason, when I started playing dobro, that seemed easier to me than fiddle, and I can't explain why it is. But the fiddle, is definitely the hardest one for me, and it was the hardest one to try to learn because of what you're talking about. But I think for me, it was more just, I think it takes me a lot longer. And still, I say takes because to me, it's an ongoing present thing that I'm always trying to improve on, intonation and that sort of thing. And to me, it almost seems more like a physical thing of just the practice of being on the note, or double stops especially. Like if I'm trying to do two notes at once, and the further up the neck you get, the more the harder it is, just because you start out playing on the lower notes, and so you've done that more times, obviously. So that was a big thing. The dobro, I relate more to a fretted instrument because it actually has the frets. You just have to align with them, and so. I do find that as a challenge, but then you have the bowing too, which is, you have those two elements that make it that much different from the fretted instruments.
Yeah. And it sounds like with the dobro, you sort of talk about the kind of, a light bulb moment, or just you can relate your banjo playing to a specific moment where you saw Alison Krauss in Union Station, and it sounds like there was a similar one with the dobro as well, seeing Rob Ickes play.
Yeah, so I was playing in this band called Blue Moon Rising, and I was the original member of the band. I played banjo in it, and on our first record, I played some dobro and fiddle. Sort of just went back and overdubbed some stuff. But the second record we made, we decided to hire Rob Ickes to play some dobro on it. And when he came to the studio, it was just me and the bass player that went to the session, but. Even just watching him sit there and warm up, he was just warming up and playing scales. It was inspiring to me because, I'd heard a lot of good dobro over time, playing tunes and that sort of thing. But even just the way that he approached getting from note to note, it just sounded different, and he seemed, so adept at just his left hand movement. So. It made me want to sit down with it and see if I couldn't get better at that. And so he caused me to spend a little more time with the instrument and think about it a lot more.
Yeah.
It was a very inspiring moment. And I'd been a fan of his before that, and still am to this day. I love his playing, and of course, Jerry Douglas being another huge influence. I've always just loved the emotion that he can play with and insert into any instrument, whether he's playing a tune or backing a vocal, especially. But both of those guys are like huge inspirations to me on that instrument.
Yeah, Jerry Douglas has a sort of a thing of just complimenting phrases that a vocalist sings. He has that ability to just sit in between without getting in the way and totally just lift things to another level, doesn't it? It's incredible to watch. And then you can see him play a fiddle tune at breakneck speed, and he can do all that as well, but he's got everything.
Yeah, I've really, tried to, it's a hard thing because, how do you extract, you can extract the notes that somebody's playing pretty easily. The more you learn and train your ear, to hear what's going on, you can hear what notes, but you can't replicate somebody's emotion that they're putting into it nearly as well. But I've spent a lot of time just trying to understand that, and try to pick out the qualities that insert that dynamic, just emotional content. It's hard to, again, quantify. You can't really do it, but but it's one of the most interesting things about somebody like him or Stuart Duncan on fiddle. It's I don't know. It's a big deal to me. It's one of the things that I want to play with that, rather than just being somebody that can play notes. I definitely want to be the kind of musician that can insert a feeling into whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that does totally make sense. I mean, music is it's a language and it's a form of communication. So you want to communicate something to the people that are listening, and you can communicate a lot. Like with language, you can communicate something really deep and meaningful in simple terms if it's heartfelt and you mean it, or you can use all the clever words and all the notes and it doesn't move you at all. And the best people can do both.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point about sort of doing a deep dive on other people's styles, because, like, on one level, it's pointless because you can never do it because you're never going to be them. But at the same time, it can inform what you do a huge amount, and the choices you make are just, like, you as an individual musician, you are a collection of your influences and your personality. And so, like, why not lean into those influences and pick out the bits that you like? Do a bit of shoplifting.
That's always been my approach, basically. The good thing is that, most people, well, I shouldn't speak for most people, but I'll speak for myself. Like, I'm a fan of so many different musicians that I do think if you try to take, ideas and pieces and this and that from all these different people, that it's going to eventually come out, as your own, thing. There's no way. It's like you said. I've listened to great banjo players like Ron Block a lot, and there's all the banjo players that played in Doyle Lawson's band, like Jim Mills, Terry Bauckham, some of these guys that I listen to those records a lot, and the things they played really, sunk into my head. But I can't sound like them. I can't really replicate their sound, and I don't want to anymore. It's like I probably did when I was younger. I probably, tried harder to just sound like them because I liked what they did so much. But it's a good thing that over time, if you really allow yourself to, explore all these different things that you like, eventually something's going to come out that doesn't sound like just one person. It's going to sound like a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I think that's true of, like, it's just a life thing, isn't it? With opinions, you start out, you pick other people's opinions that you like, and you read things, and you think, oh, that's cool, I'm going to have that. And eventually you start to put bits together and come up with your own ideas, and, you get more experience, and you start just having opinions. And sometimes it's a bit like improvising music. You say stuff to see how it sounds, and you think, yeah, no, I do believe that. That's good. And, with music, you just try things, and you keep the bits that fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you find... So I guess that the interesting point with that is you played banjo with Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder. Did you find yourself kind of slipping in licks or lines from people who'd sort of played in that spot before? Do you find that there's just certain things that were on the recording that just feel like part of that version of the tune?
Yeah, most definitely. I probably... going into the gig, I mean, I knew, a lot of his material already from just being a fan of that music, but I probably sat down with it and maybe even learned, I definitely learned certain things, verbatim, and yeah, it's not only true there, like we're talking about in a lot of other cases, it's a universal idea that there's certain things with almost any artist, besides maybe the most just, improvisational acts. But everybody else, in music, pretty much, there's signature things that people, you need to hear that to know that's the tune or that's the version even. You want people to recognize just certain aspects, and then so like Ricky never was one to be real adamant that a solo has to be a certain way or anything, but then there was, after I went and I played a gig with him before anything else, and then we did a rehearsal. But at the rehearsal, there was probably one or two of the tunes that at the end of the rehearsal, he said, maybe go back and listen to this one and that one again, and and get it. And I think to him, it's more about just learning what it takes to do that particular thing. It's like there's something to be said for that, really. Like, of just acquiring the skill it takes to do whatever somebody else did in that moment. And so, it obviously depends on who you're working with, but usually there's some signature things that it could be, up to the person, the listener, I suppose, to think whether a certain part is crucial to the song or not. But I think there's certain things that if you're a musician who, pays a lot of attention and tries to pick those things out, that you can recognize.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's definitely like a track of Ricky's, like the recording of How Mountain Girls Can Love, that's on Ancient Tones? I think it's on Ancient Tones, but it's on one of those albums, and some of the banjo fills on that, just like I expect to hear them,
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good example, and even the intro to that. I think when I showed up, I don't believe I kicked it off exactly like the record was. I had the notes actually, but I didn't have the pick. There's an up. He moves his index finger from the third string to the fourth string and uses the index finger on the fourth string, which is something that, in the regular, like Skaggs rolling, you don't do that much. But it's how Ralph kicked it off, and Jim had done that on the record, and I think Ricky pointed that out to me too. And then again, it's another one of those moments like, oh yeah, okay, I hear the difference,
Yeah, and it's funny listening to people learning particularly iconic things, like people trying to do Tony Rice's take on Church Street Blues, and like Tony's the sort of theory these days is that everything's alternate picking pretty much, but there's definitely cross picking times where that's not true, and there's double downstrokes, and Tony's just had his own thing, and like trying to replicate that is a whole can of worms, and even if you do, you're never going to sound like that, but it's fascinating to try just to see what he's doing.
It is. That's an interesting thing overall, because I've given quite a bit of lessons over the years. I used to actually give a lot of one-on-one lessons, and I always tried to start out with the idea of doing the alternate picking strokes a lot, and but it's a funny thing because I didn't think about that when I was learning that much. I was just learning to play, and so I try not to be too particular about it at first, because you want to let somebody find their way, and maybe maybe they can make something work in a way that you're not thinking it would work, and so. It's very interesting because different people can get things done in different ways, and it can end up sounding a little bit different, which is a good thing. But I think as an instructor, your instinct is to be like, well, let's try to learn to do it the way that is just conducive to being able to play fast and being able to do the things you need to do. But like you said, I mean, it's hard to replicate. That's one thing that, like with Tony's playing, I mean, I'm huge fan, and I've definitely sit down and tried to learn a lot of his stuff, but I never really worried about the pick direction. I always just wanted to learn, the notes, and again, not just the notes, the tonal quality of the notes, and the again, it's the emotional content that he's able to get, just by the attack. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but I've always been interested in trying to get at that, whatever that is.
Totally. And and some of the most sort of iconic musicians and some of the most sort of emulated musicians are people that, if you look at what they do, it's not all conventional by any means. I mean, and the obvious example, just for physical reasons, is Django Reinhardt. But but Tony's the same. Like Sam Bush, if you just look at the way Sam Bush holds a mandolin, nobody's ever going to teach you to hold a mandolin like that. And yeah, he sounds pretty good,
true.
right?
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
And
Well, and there's people like him, and there's somebody else that I think Sierra and I were watching the other day that is a great musician, but goes against what is either one of us would teach somebody to do, which is lifting their fingers off of the fretboard pretty far. That's one of the things that both of us I kind of, if we're teaching somebody, try to stress is keep your fingers close to the fretboard as you're playing, because it's easier to get to the next thing. But then, like I said, there's people you can watch that just they're way off the fretboard, but they can get it done.
I mean, you look at Ronnie McCory. There's a lot of finger movement goes on there, but
definitely.
Like anybody would take sounding like that. He gets his way around and he produces some great tone, and
Absolutely.
So I guess sort of curious, just looping back to that bit about lines that feel like part of a piece. I'm just curious to chat a bit about your part on the new Bela Fleck project and touring with that, because that's a really fascinating project, because the people who are playing, there can't be anybody in that band who played all those parts on the record. So everybody's playing something that somebody else played on the record at some point, apart from Bela.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so sort of knowing how you approach that, because I presume sort of the main bulk of the tunes was composed and written, and then there's space for breaks and stuff, but there's some fairly definite parts there as well. And just how you sort of approach that.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because I did the tour, and we're going to be doing, I think, a few more dates next year, and we have the show in January, if I'm not off on our timing of when this may come out, but in January of that'll be both bands. It'll be the band with Sierra and I and Mike Cleveland, and then Sam and Jerry, and I think Chris Thiele and Billy Strings. A lot of the people from the album are going to be on those dates. But it's funny, listening to the record at first, it was kind of intimidating, because there's a lot going on, and so being able to pick it apart, it took a lot of focus on just the part. Like, I'm the kind of person that most of the time when I listen to a song or tune, instrumental tune, I try to listen and hear everything. I mean, I'm listening to every instrument. I'm trying to figure out what every instrument's doing. But there's definitely cases on this where, I mean, I've listened to it in that way, in a listening way rather than a analyzing way. But I definitely tuned a lot of stuff out and tried to focus on what my part had to be. It was that, but also, fortunately, Bela had Sierra and I over, and he's somebody who loves to rehearse. He loves to work things out, and so we went over to his house, and he sort of showed us several of these tunes really in their most basic form, and when you hear a tune deconstructed like that, it really helps take some of that edge off of just listening to it and thinking, how am I going to remember what to do here, because a lot of them do relate to just like a standard fiddle tune, or something that I'm already have played plenty of times, but he's so good at arranging and so good at putting things together that it comes off so great, and like and I think they are brilliant, pieces of music. But he really, was kind and helpful about showing us what the parts were, and also he did another thing that was very helpful, and he made us some recordings, or some, sent us mixes of several of the songs without our instrument on them. And so we were able to, play along with those and play the part. But it's funny, I had a difficult job in that I played 4 different instruments on the show, but at the same time, I felt like I had an easier job than some of the some of the others, just because the parts that I had to do were I don't know. I mean, like the dobro parts in general for the songs that I played dobro on, the parts that were definite parts that needed to be played didn't seem, all that difficult. It's just a matter of, remembering what they are, memorization, And so, small pieces of memorization, are definitely for me, like, not as difficult as like, trying to take a crazy solo on a song. So anyway, there definitely was plenty of room. And again, same way with him as what I was talking about with Ricky before. Like he never, he doesn't want anybody to come in and play the solo, verbatim as what it was on the record. He wants you to play what you would play. But there's definitely a lot of parts that need to be the parts, in other words.
And I guess with some of the fiddle bits and stuff, there was kind of twin fiddle parts, so it's tied quite closely to another existing part anyway. So it's quite structural, I guess.
Yeah,
rather than sort of
it is.
Go on a wild solo. You're playing a second part to something that is already there.
Yeah, definitely. So that was just again, I used the I've never owned it, but Sierra has like the amazing slowdowner or some sort of, I don't remember exactly which piece of which app we were using, but she has some of that on this computer that I'm recording this on. So I had some of them in here using that for a while and different things. I mean, I used any and every method in the world to extract what I needed to from these tunes.
And it's really nice to hear that in a way, because that's an app that I use and lots of people listening to this will use. And just sort of hearing you say as well about, playing fiddle earlier, and the intonation thing is a continuous improvement thing. And just this idea that any of us could listen to you play any one of the instruments you play and go, wow. But at the same time, the idea that it is still a journey and there's still things that you're working on and there's still places to go. I think that's such a powerful thing. And it's easy just to presume some people have arrived.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I'll ever feel that way. I think that I'll always want to get better. And if you keep that, I guess, attitude about it, hopefully it allows you to. I mean, if you think you've arrived and you're not going to get any better than you are, you're probably not. You're probably not going to do it because you're not open to that. And sometimes I think just the strength of... obviously, the most obvious thing is just, practice. It's like people, talk around that a lot and whatever. But like just even the practice I had to put in to learn the tunes and be ready to play these songs for the Bela tour, I honestly think that it's made me a better player. Just, it's so incrementally that I don't know that anybody else would notice it that much, but I know that there are certain things in there that, I was able to improve on in that amount of time. And I think that's been the way it's been through my whole career. I know that even 15, 20 years ago, I had a certain ability, to play, and I've always felt like I had a certain ability to play, but I've never thought, oh, this is great, like this is this is where I want to be. It's always, I've always wanted to get better, and I still, to this day, have that. And I'm not somebody that, I can't claim that I work harder than everybody else, because it seems absurd to me. I probably don't work as hard as some people, but I definitely am aware, and I try to put time in, and I try to, really my practice stuff is based a lot on what gigs I have and what are coming up and that sort of thing. But it always seems to work out to where, there's this weird even distribution of my concentration on each instrument, just out of different people wanting me to do these different things. it requires, in other words, it requires me to put the time in, to be able to just do what I have to do to play the gigs that I end up in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of, if I'm completely honest, part of the reason I started a podcast of backing tracks was just to give myself some deadlines. Do you know what I mean? It's like I could sit at home learning stuff, but I could probably 6 months down the line be able to play Whiskey Before Breakfast a little bit better because I just sit there playing that. Whereas if I've got to record something every week, I'm like, well, I can't embarrass myself now. I've got to be able to play this. And it's just a little sort of a bit of built-in accountability because nobody's phoning me up to go and do gigs or sessions, but I need some deadlines because, it always keeps me moving.
That's great. I mean, we have to do those things. And that's, I need to get better still at that when I'm not, I'm in a period right now, so I did that tour, and that tour is kind of over. I don't really have a lot of touring coming up until after the first of the year, but I'm producing a couple of records and doing that kind of stuff, and work in the studio. So, and I definitely am thinking about what my next record needs to be, and I've started working on a couple things that may or may not be a part of it. It's hard to say yet, but in that whole process, I could spend days in the studio on stuff I've already recorded and never touch an instrument in a way, but I need to get better still at being disciplined enough to force myself when I'm not having to do a certain thing. Like, okay, for instance, this week I had in addition to, again, the records I'm working on producing wise, I had a dobro overdub, and then like the end of last week I had 2 or 3 fiddle overdubs, which is great. Again, it gives me I'm going to be sitting here playing those instruments during that time, and inevitably, regardless, if I pick an instrument up to play it, to do that, if it's just one song, I'm still going to get quite a bit of playing in because, when I pick it up, I'm going to play other things rather, than just that song. And I'm going to practice and get the physical practice in other words. But I can think about it and go, well, but did I play any guitar? Well, I've probably not played guitar in a week or so, just out of, okay, that's maybe not, maybe guitar was a bad example because I did in the course of, producing this record, but mandolin, or for instance, or something, it's possible that I've not played mandolin or banjo or something in a few days. And so anyway, I should probably still be developing a better routine as far as just playing each instrument and staying on them a little better than I do.
It's interesting here you talk about sort of plans for the next album because that leads on quite nicely to talk about your last album, Fall Like Rain, and sort of I'm curious to know because obviously you can play all the instruments on that album, but it's quite an unusual album in terms of the mix of it. It's often you will get an album from somebody who's is often a member of somebody else's band or a session player, or where that is their time to sort of lead and shine, and they write the tunes, they sing all the tunes, they feel like the focal point. And it's quite eclectic, both in terms of the material, but in terms of different people singing, different people playing different instruments. And so putting that together must have been really interesting in terms of who you were going to get in to do what.
Yeah, it really was. And I had a lot of fun in the process of putting it together. It's that is interesting too, because it's like, I want to put albums together like that one, in other words, that where I want to showcase like what I could produce, in other words, in a certain way, in addition to not losing the focus on something that I'm doing. But I realize for a listener it could be really hard to pick out in times, definitely, like what's he doing, like what's my part, because I play the different instruments. It's probably not very obvious, and I've become a little bit more aware of that since even making that record. It's something that I didn't think too much about going into it, And I knew I wanted to sing a few songs on the record myself too. And so I think if I make another one, I'll probably do most of the lead singing, and just so that it's, it's very clear that this is, my record, and maybe hopefully make a little bit more of a statement of, what, I would want to present or whatever. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun because I made an instrumental EP before that where I did play everything on it. And I knew that I didn't want to do that for this record, the Fall Like Rain record. And so I wanted to have a lot of people involved and be able to play with people that are not myself. And so, yeah, it was interesting because I had such a long list of people that I wanted to have involved. I had to just make what logistically would work. I had to plan the studio days accordingly with who was available on what day. But I loved the way it worked out. I had such a good time. So I had the core band on the first day was Barry Bells on bass, Sierra, Bryan Sutton on guitar, and Stuart Duncan on fiddle. And so we cut, 2 or 3 songs that morning, and then Mike Cleveland came in that evening, and we cut Taxland at the end of the first day. And so that was the same core band, just subbing in Mike for Stuart Duncan. And on the second day, Cody Kilby was more of the guitar player, and I had Jason Carter in to play fiddle on the one that Dale was going to sing, and stuff like that. So I mean, it was a really cool mix to me of people that I've played music with before, and people that I wanted to play music with that I hadn't got to play very much with, like Mike. Yeah, so it was. I wanted to have a lot of my heroes, and of course I had Dan Tyminski on guitar and vocal on the one song. I just enjoyed, playing in his band so much and singing with him that I wanted to capture that on my own recording. And so that was one of the things that I was fortunate enough to put together was the tune with he and I. And Dale's just such a cool guy and a cool figure that I've got to play. I've never played, obviously like in his band, like his band's been his band, but I've gotten to play with them a lot over the past, several years in different little situations. And so again, it was just a whole lot of fun to get to sing with Dale and just be in the studio with him. He's just such a cool guy and a calming figure,
I can imagine. And I think it's really interesting because obviously it's your album and it's your project, but even just talking about it now, the element that I hadn't sort of thought about so much is it's almost as much your project as a producer than it is as a performer. It's got that sort of feel almost like some of the Mark Ronson albums where he gets in different singers, but he sort of curates this vibe and this atmosphere and something that serves each song and each tune as well. And it's such a great record.
Well, thank you. That's exactly really what I wanted to create with it. I have so many. There's so many figures in bluegrass that I have loved what they do. I can't, point to just one with my album that I patterned it after, but I can mention a few that I love Ronnie Bowman's bluegrass records, and he's somebody that I've also gotten to sing with. He was on the list, but I couldn't figure out some way to get him involved this time, and hopefully I will in something in the future. But he's made several records that just they're not just good songs. They're good songs that fit together in a way that really just make a great record to listen to from top to bottom, and that was something that I wanted to try for. I don't know how successful it was, but
I mean, I definitely think it's a success on that level. It's just because it's got such a variety of dynamics and personnel and energy, and it's not just a bunch of breakneck tunes and a couple of ballads. It's got an arc to it and a shape to it, and something that feels consciously put together.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Recording for me is so complicated because I feel like there's so many ways I could go with it that it's hard to focus down on what it needs to be. So I had this big list going of several different ideas and different records, because to me, I think we started this the year after I won the Dobro Player of the Year at IBMA, and so in my mind, it's like, well, people are starting to think of me as this dobro player, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they voted that way, so maybe I should make a dobro record. That's very concentrated on that, and then I could say the same thing though about every instrument, and so I started laying it out that way, and then I had my bluegrass centered, like just vocals and all that sort of stuff record over here. And I had all these different things, and then eventually, I just ended up going, well, yeah, I have all these different ideas, but let me pick some of the best from all of them and try to make the best record I can possibly make. That's really what happened, is that I sort of took a lot of ideas that I had separately and put them together and tried to pick the things that would work together, flow together. And in a way, that was ideal, and I think I made the record I should have made. In other words, for me at the time, but it still leaves me with the same conundrum the next time, and still leaves me thinking, well, did I use up all the things that? Now what have I got? In other words, but there, that's the great thing about it, is you want to set the bar as high as you can, and then try to beat that, keep beating that,
Yeah, you just give the best of what you've got at the time, and you don't save any bit for another time, and then you've just got to start again.
Yeah.
So I listening to sort of knowing your curiosity and picking instruments up as you go, I kind of wondered if after getting an oud player in for Walking to Lebanon, if you ended up buying an oud, if that's piqued your curiosity.
That is a good question, but I have not. I have not gotten an oud yet. That would be a lot of fun. I really should. I've loved telling the story several times on interviews that I've done about Sierra and I taking the trip with her bluegrass band in 2014. We did a State Department trip. We went to Micronesia and we went to the West Bank, and we were there for each of those places for a week, solid week. And we got to play with some great oud and tabla players over there. And, that's been something that's stuck with me ever since. And I wrote this tune independently of all that, but I thought it'd be great if I could get some good players to be on that. And for whatever reason, I know there's people, in the U.S. that play those instruments, but I wanted somebody from that region to do it, and so I was, happy to be able to get that as well.
Yeah, and it sounds great, and it's just another colour on the album. That's one of the nice things about it, I think, is the instrumentation is varied, as well as the material and the dynamics, and each track is a little thing to itself, as well as being part of the whole.
Yeah, I didn't want to limit myself, honestly. I wanted to explore whatever made sense for the song itself, I mean, there's definitely cases where it evolved as time went on, like I had intended on the one with Del McCurry in it, for instance, I recorded it without, thinking about any dobro or anything like that, and it was just going to be fiddle, banjo, guitar, mandolin, bass. But after, listening to it for a while and having a dobro in my hand and playing along with it, I went, you know what, I think this actually would do something for it. So, I just ended up adding it later and kind of picking and choosing a couple of things to take out to, make room. But there was a lot of that kind of, work involved in putting this together. Same with the tune with Dan. I wasn't quite sure whether it would have any fiddle or not. I knew that I wanted the dobro thing in it, but I played around with it a little bit, with fiddle myself, and thought, okay, well, this is going to add something, so I'm going to put it, and it's hard to know at times, like the inclination, I think, for a lot of people that produce records, or you can fall into a trap of always wanting more and more and more, and sometimes less is the answer,
Yeah, and I think. Sorry, yeah. I was always going to say, it was particularly the time when sequencers arrived and electronic music. It just felt like people added layers, and everything that started at the beginning of the track played all the way through to the end, and everything was really busy, and that leaving space. You can always fill a space you've left, but you can't. It's harder to create a space when you've got a really full track.
It is, yeah. Yeah, that's something that always interests me.
Yeah, and you were saying about the next record, you're probably going to sing most of the lead vocals yourself. Have you got...
Well, most likely, yeah. I still don't know exactly how it's going to come together and what shape it's going to take. There's a part of me that, like, instrumental music is such a big part of what I do and love. I definitely want that to be an important part of it, but I want to have some singing on it too. And so I'm trying to figure out how... right now, I just don't know that I have all the songs. I know I don't actually, but I'm trying to get started with some instrumental things and see if I get the inspiration for what the vocal section of it needs to be. In other words, yeah.
And what else have you got on the horizon? I know you were saying there's potentially some more Bela dates next year.
There is, yeah. There's a short run that's supposedly happening in January, and then another one in I think either April or May, something like that. And then there's going to be another one in the middle of the summer too. Yeah, that's really right now, as far as touring goes, that's the main thing that I know I'm going to be doing. And Sierra and I do some duo shows from time to time, and I expect there's going to be some of that at some point along the way next year too. It's hard to pinpoint because she's working on her band schedule right now too, and it'll all have to take shape as far as that goes. And I'm getting asked to do some other things. It's very cool. I'm at a place where I get to do a lot of interesting things. I'm getting to play a show with Tim O'Brien coming up in December, and so it's I'm getting to do a lot of varied things, which I absolutely love that aspect of it. And the shows that I do with Sierra are some of the most fun things as well. So I look forward to more of that. We actually spent a day in the studio trying to record some stuff, and we've not really spent much time since then working on it or listening to it very much. But we'll eventually get around to working on that. Hopefully we'll at some point put some music out that's just the two of us. So
yeah, cool.
That's also in the background.
Yeah, lots of things on the go then.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for doing this. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Cool, so there we have it. Hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. I'll put links in the show notes, obviously, to Justin's website and where you can go to find dates for the Bela Fleck tour and any other bits and pieces. I'll be back again with some more tunes, some more interviews, and some more bluegrass. So have a great week. I will see you next time, and in the meantime, happy picking. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.